Right. Welcome everybody to this episode of O365A. On this episode, we're joined by Microsoft MVP Lee Ford. Lee does a lot of work with Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365, and Azure Communication Services, which is today's topic. What is Azure Communication Services and how does it integrate with Microsoft Teams? And we're even going to get a live demo from Lee. So welcome, Lee, and why don't you just take a couple of minutes and introduce yourself and what you do day to day.
Okay, yeah, thank you for having me. So as you said, my name is Lee Ford. I'm based in the UK. I'm a Microsoft MVP and the M365 development track. So effectively around building apps that utilize M365. So part of that is Microsoft Graph. Obviously, part of that is Microsoft Teams. Hence why I'm here today. And any other kind of associated kind of anything that has an API that Microsoft make basically kind of fits into that bucket. So my day-to-day job is effectively either integrating directly with M365 applications such as Teams, so building apps that sit inside of Teams, or building tools that you can interface with something like Teams. So if you wanted to like a Teams management tool or something like that, that's ultimately my day-to-day job is kind of building tools that fit into either of those camps. So it might be that we require an app or a customer requires an app that sits in inside of Teams, and be able to access it from Teams and leverage Teams as kind of the conduit for the app. Or it might be that they want to do some particular reporting or something M365 related, and maybe authentication issues. That's where we come in and effectively help them kind of bridge that gap. So that's my day-to-day job, is kind of trying to solve problems. Best way to describe it.
Fantastic. I think that's what we all do day to day, solve problems.
Yeah.
So let's talk Azure Communication Services. For someone not familiar with it, let's just do an intro, and specifically, let's just talk about how it integrates with Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, so Azure Communication Services is I guess, similar to Microsoft Teams. If you were to just read what it does and not read the word Azure, or and then kind of knowing what you know about Teams, you think, well, hang on a minute, isn't it the same thing? Well, I don't see the difference here. And essentially, they are using the same underlying technology, so something called IC3, which is where all sort of all the kind of translation and network traversal and all those kind of underlying things that you don't see sort of using Teams, all of that is kind of run through IC3. So imagine it's kind of the backbone of Teams. It's also the backbone of Azure Communication Services. Where Azure Communication Service differs from Teams is a product. You buy Teams, you don't need to know about IC3. You don't need to. All you need to do is license your users, configure it, and obviously get going. Obviously, there's a bit more nuance than that, but ultimately it's a, say, off-the-shelf product, whereas ACS effectively tries to solve the same problem, but in your own application. So if you've got a say a video conferencing application that you're building, or some software you want to add some voice or something like that, or PSTN calling, it's a way of using the same technology that Teams is powered by, but in your own applications. How that integrates with Teams is there is some crossover. So you can have something like you could build your own app, but allow users that are assigned to Teams to use their Teams identity to sign into the app, so they don't have to have a separate account. Another scenario is where you might want to have a video call between Teams users and non-Teams users, and that's where something like ACS can help bridge that gap.
Fantastic. And just to level set, you can use all the calling features of Azure Communication Services without Microsoft Teams. It just leverages the identity, right, of the user.
Correct. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So to be honest, ACS can be completely separate from Teams. You don't even need to have Teams. So if you wanted to use your own identity provider, you want to sign in with your own authentication methods or no authentication methods, ultimately you can do that with ACS, but you can also, like I say, bring your Teams into the mix as well.
And then another high level question. So let's say Teams isn't involved. We're going to make a call through ACS, and we're going to do a PSTN call out to the public phone system. How are the numbers logistically organized? Like, is it just in the API you specify the numbers that are called, or can it reuse my Teams profile, like the numbers configured for me? Is that an option?
Yeah, so I don't think you can use your Teams numbers yet anyway. It has to be a separate number. You have SBCs similar to you have in direct routing SBCs. You can also have them in ACS. They call them Azure direct routing, I think is the term, just to differentiate from Teams direct routing. But ultimately, the setup is roughly the same. So you have users with identities that obviously then you can specify what numbers to use. Same with obviously inbound calls. You can obviously configure your application to route the calls accordingly based on what numbers are coming in. You can also do SMS, which you can't do in Teams. So you can now add, I think it's US and Canadian numbers as it stands, to allow SMS communications as well. So if you've got an application that's, you're going to receive a load of SMS, or you're going to bulk send SMS out, that's something you can do with ACS. You don't have to kind of have another solution on top if you want to do that.
Yeah, I know that SMS feature was a lot of people were waiting for that for a long time.
Yes,
that's good. All right, well, let's dive into a demo and see it in action. So I know you have a small little demo you can show us, which I think it's basically using ACS through a web portal, right?
correct. Yes. So so what I've got here is it's a simple demo. It's very simple to explain. There's a simple premise behind why you might want to do something like this. But yeah, it's effectively using ACS and Teams together. So I'll just back on the demo. So what we're trying to solve in this sort of demo or sample is scenario where you may have come across, where if you're familiar with something like TeamViewer or AnyDesk or something, where you may want to reach out to an external party who may or may not be using Teams, but obviously they do have a computer, they do have a web browser, and you want to be able to kind of connect with them, maybe get them to share their screen. And you don't want to have to think, oh, have they got Teams installed? Have they got a Teams account? Can they join a Teams meeting? All that sort of stuff. If you can go to this website, then you're golden. You can just get on from there. So what we have here is we have a user inside of Teams. They have a team called Super Cool Team, and in here they can create remote assistance requests for external parties. So if you imagine I'm someone in a support team, and I've got someone that needs to I need to assist, I can effectively go into Teams and I can create a remote assistance request. And so in here I will specify person that's needing assistance. Okay, so I'm going to put some bogus information in there. I'm going to submit that, and then we cross our fingers, we should get a response back here. So what's happened here is we've got a request back. It's come back with a meeting ID. Now this meeting ID is the Teams meeting ID. So similarly, if you go to say your calendar and you can join with an ID, it's the same ID. So in theory, we could join using the ID here. But if we go back to the team, this ID, if I just copy that for a second, where that is used is you give that out to the external parties. It's like, say, something similar to, say, a team viewer, where you may be trying to assist someone and they'll be, yeah, okay, here's the ID, enter the ID, and then they can join onto your machine. It's effectively a similar kind of concept, just reversed, in that we're providing the ID rather than them, but ultimately it's the same kind of concept.
And so you're surfacing this program into Teams using like a custom app, Teams app that has a message extension. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, it's exactly right. Yeah. So we have should have mentioned that. Yeah, we have a message extension that sits inside of a team. So this message extension can be used across multiple teams. So if you've got multiple support teams or multiple use cases for it, you can add the same message extension into multiple teams. And then obviously, yeah, you're just effectively creating a new request using the message extension. So So we've created a request using the message extension. We've copied the ID. Now, from a Teams perspective, I just need to click the join button, and I will join that call. Okay, all being well anyway. So I'm in that call. Now, if I go to a new tab, I've got a web browser open, and I just enter the ID. I'm just going to paste it in, say, kind of typing in. That comes through and it finds the meeting details. Now, what we're doing in the background that you can't really see here is we're having to store the meeting details in a database. So we're using Cosmos database for clarity, but ultimately, and the reason we do that is that we can't query Microsoft Graph just using the meeting ID. So what we have to do is we have to store the meeting details in a database, and then when the user goes to the web page, they enter their ID. That sends a request to our app. Our app then effectively checks the database to say, has a meeting been created using this ID? Yes, it has. And then what happens in the background is that the Teams meeting details get sent back to the browser, and then in the browser here, I've effectively got the Teams web join URL underneath. So when I click Start Call, that will join using the Teams meeting. So now if I go back to the Teams meeting, I can see now there's an anonymous guest. Now, one thing that I could add to the sample, but I haven't, is I could ask, it could come up with a prompt, say, who are you, or some sort of validation like a password or something like that, to make it a bit more kind of, rather than just some random person joining, but ultimately for simplicity's sake in the sample, it's just an anonymous person joining. If I click admit, that will then admit the person in now. So I've got both sides are muted, and we've got no video, but ultimately that call is in progress. Now it does bring up here that say there's limited call features. There are some quirks with Teams meetings and remote assistance. So certain things like certain views won't work, and certain things like reactions to chat messages don't work. So nothing of a showstopper really. It's just something to bear in mind that it's not an exact same experience that you'll get in a pure Teams meeting. As soon as you have an ACS user join, there is kind of, it's almost like downgraded ever so slightly, I'll put it like that. And that ultimately is the demo, without wanting to put the video on and the audio on and cause a massive feedback loop. That's effectively how simple it is to join the call.
How customizable is the end experience? Because obviously the ACS gives you the value of not having to build a whole meeting mechanism, deal with media or anything like that. You're just dealing with controls. But how much can you modify like that site where it's not the Teams client, but it's going into the Teams meeting?
Absolutely, yeah. You can pretty much customize all of it. So this is the default look and feel. But you can effectively theme the whole thing yourself. You don't have to use the UI components that are built in here. These are the ones to kind of get you up and running. But if you've got a certain theme or certain style of your existing app, and you think, well, this is going to look out of place as it is, you can change the colors, change the icons, change the layout. You can pretty much style the whole thing to fit into your app, so they wouldn't even know that you're using Teams or ACS or anything. And that's kind of the beauty of this, is that the person that's just logged in here, they have no idea what Teams is. They have no idea what ACS is. They just told to enter a code and click join, and that's what they've done. And that's kind of what I'm trying to convey here.
So this is really cool. So it's like, it's hard to tell which part of this is hosted in ACS and which part of it is hosted in Teams. And is this a meeting outside of Teams? Is this an AC, or is ACS using ACS to simply get the external user to join a Teams meeting?
Yeah, so it's a Teams meeting underneath. So when you do the request in Teams, it goes to Microsoft Graph. It creates a Teams meeting like any other Teams meeting, and it includes obviously like the join URL that you'd send out on an external invite, in your calendar. And effectively, what happens is when the user goes to a web page, they enter their code. That then checks against our database to see if someone's created a Teams meeting with that code, and inside the database we include the connection details that you would get back from Teams, and then effectively what ACS is doing is it's effectively a proxy almost of allowing an external user to join a Teams meeting without being in Teams. If that makes sense. So it's just another way in, but it is a Teams meeting.
And Lee, is there any licensing at play here? Like, just with all the Teams licensing you have, does that give you the ability to join an ACS user into the meeting?
So from a licensing perspective, there is no license required in Teams in addition to what you already have. So if you can already create Teams meetings, then you license for Teams, then away you go. And from an ACS point of view, there is no license either, but there is a cost associated with using ACS, but it is on a sort of pay-as-you-go model. So it's like fractions of $1 per minute or whatever, but you only pay for what you use. So if no one's using it, you're not paying for it to just sit there. But there's no like fixed licensing that you have to pay per user per month or anything.
Right.
Is there a specific ACS deployment that you need to do in Azure? In order, like, is there like a unique type? Because I know that there's a few different types of.
Yes, I can show you. I can show you that. Yeah. So this is the sample that I have. All the components that I have in Azure. So the main one is the communication service. This is the ACS. Now ACS itself doesn't actually host the code. You host the code in your own application. So if you've already got an existing, something is sitting in Amazon or wherever, you don't have to host anything. Like the only thing that has to sit in Azure is the communication services. Now, like I say, I've decided to put a database and a storage account in here just because it makes sense to put it here. But again, these don't have to sit here. If you've already got a database somewhere else or in a different environment or part of your app already, you don't need to have that. The only thing you absolutely have to have is the communication service. Now the bot registration that I have, that's purely for the messaging extension to be able to call in the team inside of the team to create the meeting. Now, obviously, if you were doing it a different way, you don't necessarily need that. The bare minimum is the communication service.
Gotcha. And so I guess, like we were sort of talking a bit offline, like Dino was mentioning, like this is sort of the art of what's possible that you can do with ACS. I guess you could take this and put it into, any type of like contact center applications that you may have, or, queuing system or something like that, that, you may be utilizing as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So if you just look here, we've got things like phone numbers and direct routing, an SMS, an email, and it is almost starting to look a bit like a contact center in its own right, where you could effectively add that functionality to an existing app that you already have, or any existing. If you already got some kind of pseudo contact center that you've built, you could absolutely tie this into it as an added option. I think one thing that I did see, it was so I think it's in preview at the point, was talking about having some sort of like routing of different modalities as well. So almost like a contact center where you may have emails coming in and SMSs and phone calls or whatever, and effectively being able to assign each one of those as a job, and then effectively put them in a queue. So it is starting to move that way, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, all this sort of begs the question. I mean, just for our listeners' sake, that this whole model of the power model of using contact center, and there was connect and extend, and now this power model, which was largely unknown, just maybe a year, 18 months ago. But it seems that a lot of contact centers are looking at this in terms of not only developing, a complete contact center outside of Teams, but even just having their own little client involved in it as well. So whether it'll integrate with Teams or not is completely up to them. So just curious if you had thoughts on that and seeing
Yeah, no,
how far this
absolutely.
may go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think it is definitely moving that way, where kind of the sort of using the Teams client itself as the kind of as the client makes sense to a certain extent. But I think what we're seeing more is companies kind of building, like you say, their own app inside of Teams. You still sign in to Teams. You don't have a separate web page open or separate app open. But ultimately, all the routing and all the smarts and all the kind of distribution of calls or whatever, they happen outside of Teams. And Teams is just ultimately the kind of the wrapper around it. It just saves them having to have a separate separate client to, okay, I'm on the contact center and I need to have Teams open for messages and people calling me internally, and then I need another client for, getting calls through as an agent. All of a sudden that goes away. I think people are trying to kind of handle all the queuing and all the kind of modalities, different modalities that are not core to Teams, but also don't want to kind of have a separate client. You kind of want to have both together. And I think ACS absolutely gives you that, or it seems like maybe a cleaner solution than kind of having everything separate. I would say.
Lee, in your travels, have you seen some really cool or fantastic use of ACS integrated into Teams? I thought your demo was pretty neat in terms of offering that meeting join experience. But any other examples that you'd like to share?
I think that the one that I've seen a lot that makes a lot of sense as well is the kind of the virtual appointments. So what I've done here is more an ad hoc thing where, I need to speak to this person. Here's a code, enter the code on this website, and away you go. What I've seen a lot of, which I think is a really cool way, is if you need to book some time with a medical professional or a lawyer, and you don't want to kind of have to send out details for every time someone wants to speak to you. The idea is that you can literally go onto a web page and go, oh yeah, I want to speak to this person, select the person, select the time you want to speak to them, and then effectively in the background something gets spun up in Teams. So as far as the resource or the person that you're booking against is in Teams, they know no different. And on your end, the same website that you logged into to access and make your booking, whether it's a doctor or whoever, there's just a join button next to the booking that you've made. They click the join button, they join via the web page, and they have no idea that it's in Teams or whatever. They've just joined a meeting that they've booked. I think that is definitely one cool way of doing it. I think another one I've seen is people wanting to speak to, I think it's like law enforcement, I think it was, where they are effectively sort of go up to a like a kiosk, and they want to make a call and speak to someone, but they don't want it to be Teams branded. They ultimately just want a simple web page that they would click. Oh yeah, I need to speak to certain part of law enforcement. They press a button, almost like a drop down list on a web page. They press a button and then put them through to someone, again without having a public user having to know how Teams works. And okay, well, I'm signed to Teams, let's have a poke around. It's, oh yeah, I need to speak to this department. They press that department button, and it sets up a call with that department in Teams on the department's end. But on your end, it's just in a kiosk, computer in a kiosk. That's a couple of cool scenarios I've seen anyway.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Very cool. Yeah, this seems like a whole sort of communication API to expand and open Teams up to use cases that just previously weren't possible, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's the plan, is not to replace Teams. It's to extend your application into Teams, but also extend your application even if you don't use Teams in that way. But just say, oh, actually, it'd be cool if we could make video calls in our app, or be able to bring in these external users into our application without having to, like I say, build a whole communication API yourself, you're effectively just shortcutting it by going, oh, well, Microsoft have built it. They use the same technology for Teams. Like, it's, from my experience, this demo didn't take that long to set up. It was a pretty straightforward thing, and I guess that's the whole point of it, is that you don't have to be spending weeks and weeks trying to build your own kind of AV application. You can kind of just use ACS.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. All right, well, that was fantastic, Lee. Great overview of Azure Communication Services, how it integrates with Teams. I learned a lot. Thanks for doing a live demo. That was great. The demo gods were nice. Everything worked.
Absolutely.
All right, well, we'll leave it at that. So it was a pleasure talking to you, Lee, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers now.